Welcome to the next portrait of the GWNet Energy Transition Role Model Series. My name is Irina Gaubinger, the Project Manager with GWNet, the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. This initiative is supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. I am here today with Dr. Anna Trbovich. She is co-founder and COO of Singularity, an energy blockchain innovator pronounced World Economic Forum Tech Pioneer. She serves as Vice Chair of the Energy Web Foundation and is Managing Board Member of the European Institute for Innovation and Technology. Anna teaches entrepreneurship at FEFA, a leading business school in Belgrade, Serbia, and has consulted on competitiveness and innovation policy for international organizations such as the EU and the World Bank. Anna has been actively engaged in Serbia's economic reforms and the EU accession process, both as apolitical high government official and senior advisor. Welcome, Anna. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for inviting me to this series.
Happy to have you. So let's just transit to the questions right away. The first one is about your journey to sustainable entrepreneurship. What has that looked like for you?
Well, I've always had an interest in a public good, starting from my undergraduate studies in economics, which focused on environmental economics. And then later, although my PhD was essentially more in public international law and human rights, it also focused on good governance, which economic rights are a major part of, including right to certain environmental sustainable way of living. And later on, when I consulted on different innovation policy aspects and competitiveness, one of the areas was also to promote renewable energy with policy such as feed-in tariffs, access to the grid, and so forth, which was relatively new in the Western Balkans and Serbia, where I come from. And this all occurred in early 2000s. Later, I got involved with the current startup, which for me, the impact part of our startup was critical to my decision to join actively and pursue this endeavor, because what we do is it's effectively software development in the energy sector, but it's software that facilitates and optimizes use of renewables in the end.
What is it then that motivates you in your day-to-day work?
The end goal, which we essentially have had two products as a company. One is to enable companies to innovate using this new technology that came about, or I should rather say has been applied more earnestly in the last few years, which is blockchain technology. And we co-founded the Energy Web Foundation, which today gathers over 100 corporates from around the world, as well as startups. And this organization now has a shared technology, a shared platform with a core layer that everybody is using to innovate. Our second product is software that could be and does not need to be implemented on a blockchain, and it creates local energy exchanges. It effectively allows people to use their local resources, which essentially are renewables like solar panels and others, in a way that is more optimal, that can be shared with the neighbors, with the community, and overall improve the flexibility of the grid.
So far, what has been your severest hurdle and your proudest success?
Well, multiple hurdles, I'd say, of which probably the most important when you innovate and when you are in cutting edge innovation is to prioritize. Because there are so many things that you could be doing. You have ideas on how you can use a new technology in this market, which has not been very innovative in the last several decades. And so you have to prioritize, you have to choose. And then again, if you care about impact, you also have to find a way to push for innovation while being able to be funded. So For us, because we rely on open source innovation, that is a particular challenge. Another aspect, and it's related to that, which is resources. And one of the reasons why we moved to Berlin was because this was a city where we could attract talent. It is also a city where it is relatively easy, administratively speaking, to obtain permits for people who are not German or EU citizens, which, for example, is not the case in Switzerland or another market. So this is very much to the advantage of innovation in Germany. And then you have to make sure that everybody works well together. That people are productive, but they're also very happy where they are and driven. So this, while a challenge, has been easier for us because people are more productive because they like the field.
Would you like to say something about your proudest success as well?
Well, our company's success is the launch of the Energy Web Foundation, where we got large companies and startups to work together and collaborate, although in the real world, many are competitors. For our second product, we're still in development, so a success would be that it works and that we find a collaborator to put it in practice and test it in real world, and then see if our proposition is validated in the market. Generally, if we take it to the individual level, which I assume is the focus of this interview as well, and to be able to translate what is a problem in the energy world in terms of the management of the grid, in terms of using the resources that we have, into a computer programming requirement, is a skill that I had to develop and learn, because, as you're aware, my background is in law and economics, and the language I use most of the day today in terms of communicating and explaining what we do is more about energy systems management, or computer programming, which generally is the knowledge and skills that people learn when they have an electrical engineering or a computer science degree. And this is most of the team. This is the leap that one has to make if one wants to make a difference in energy transition. So, if you take it from my side, then you have to learn the additional skills of electrical engineering and computer programming, or at least be able to understand them, to bring the two worlds together and to push forward with business development. Or if you come from the electrical engineering side, you have to learn how the energy systems work so that when you program, you know how it all comes together. And again, if you come from an energy world, you still have to understand the computer and the business requirements. So this multidisciplinary approach is a challenge for anyone who wants to be in this field and to advance in this field. You have to be open and ready to learn, even if it's a field that's completely different from yours, because it is this multidisciplinary knowledge that is required.
Mm-hmm. Well, this already answers my next question, I think, which was, which career paths could lead young women to entrepreneurial activities like yours?
I mean, I can also give you some examples about some women who work here. So we have a woman who's a product owner who has grown into this role. I mean, she comes with a PhD in electrical engineering. But one of the advantages of a startup is that you get to have multiple roles, and you can grow in a way that will take more time or may not happen if you work in a corporate where you have a single role. We have another woman who was an energy engineer working at a utility in Kenya, got a master's degree in Germany, and is not only conducting research now for us in terms of how you integrate different aspects of the energy into the software that we're doing, but she is also working with clients, with energy companies, and taking a business role that she did not study but has grown into through working with us. We also have another example, which is our most recent intern, who is studying computer science at TU Berlin, who has come from France, and she is being guided by our senior backend developer to hone her skills in programming, also working on a real use case while completing her master's degree. So we have different roles that women have taken in our company, in addition to the two women who are co-founders of our company here in Berlin.
Mm-hmm. No, those are all very inspiring examples. Do you think that there are any specific skills that one would need, given your experience?
In my opinion, if you want to be in energy transition, it is useful to know a relatively basic, but not entirely easy, but relatively easy, I would say, to learn programming language, which is Python, at least with the level of being able to understand the code or to be able to test the code, if not actually program the code or a more complicated aspect of it. It's like another language. It's like a foreign language, if you wish, that is useful to learn, even if you're on the business side of energy, because more and more with the digital transformation of the business, it's a useful skill to have. If you are coming from the programming world, then you really need to get practical experience as soon as possible, because many businesses will have certain software that they work with, certain languages that they work with, where you learn by doing, and you have to be open, and it's really important to have a good mentor, a more senior person who will teach you on the job. Writing I also find to be a very useful skill. Being able to digest and summarize and present a certain information and to inform someone else in a way that is useful and saves them time. And this is something that is taught still more frequently in American schools than European schools. But one of the most useful classes I took was a communication class and a writing class, where you would just write tons of memos or short essays, or present and be filmed, or learn to actively listen, or take a negotiation class. Those are all some very practical skills that are good to have on the job. And my most useful high school skill is typing. So learning to type fast has certainly saved me time. So those are just some, they sound like basics, but really can differentiate a person on the job.
Thanks for sharing that. So looking a bit more on the women's perspective, what do you see as the main opportunities and challenges for women who want to make a difference in the sustainable energy field?
So I would say that generally challenges are similar to that faced by men in the field. Although, to be completely honest, I feel that there is still a certain stereotype in that many men, when I attend events, assume that I am either in marketing or HR, and they assume that do not have a certain technical knowledge and so forth. So there is, sometimes you have to fight this initial prejudice and make an impression. And so sometimes you have to try even harder. And this comes again with time, but the goal is not to take it personally, not to overreact, and just be aware of it. But at the same time, gently also let people know if they overstep boundaries. It is something new, especially when I attend large events like the European Utility Week, which is, 12, 15,000 people. It does not seem that there is, I do not know what the figures are, but just by looking around the room, it seems as if women are still not even 10%. It's very, very visible. It's very visible. And in many of these companies, people have worked for a very long time. So I think another challenge is, even when you come to that environment, you will often come to an environment where people have worked for already more than 10 years or some 15, 20 in the same company, and they already have a certain culture. So in that sense, it's not always an attractive work culture to be in. And it's a balance that one has to make for oneself, where you want to contribute to the change, but do so in a way that is perceived as constructive.
Speaking of another balance, do you have any recommendation for combining a career with a personal life, or even family with kids?
Well, I asked that question once of a woman that I admired, and who seemed to have done it all. A PhD, a high-ranking job in the IMF, and 3 kids. And I asked her, when do you do what? And she said, there is no rule. You just do it all at the same time. And I did it all at the same time. It is an additional strain because, to be honest, women are still expected to do more at home as a parent. This is, of course, much better in some more advanced societies like Scandinavia, but the rest of the world is still catching up, and it does put an additional strain. And you're also viewed differently for promotion and taking on more challenging jobs, no matter what the law, when you're at the age when you are planning or you just have little kids. At the same time, I also find that they give you a perspective, and that they give you a certain maturity even for the professional life, because you learn to manage your time forcefully, right? But you learn to manage your time better, and to appreciate some objectives and to prioritize better. So there is also an upside in that challenge. And I heard someone say once that gender equality will happen when mediocre women get promoted, which is currently the case with men, but not with women. And I was recently asked about a woman who was just given a top position in one of the largest energy associations, what I think of her and how qualified she is. And I answered, of course, she's overqualified, or she would never have the job. So I feel that is still very much the case. So you are expected to do more. And, at the end, you just do what you can. And at the time when it comes, I'm not sure if planning helps. I took this woman's advice that you cannot plan and you just do it at the same time. I survived and still managed to do things that I liked. But I also feel that that's because I'm in Europe, and that it would not have been possible if I had stayed in the US, because there are different expectations, because there is also a certain appearance that is important to them, like the appearance of still being at work in the evening, regardless of the productivity. Whereas I felt that in Europe, it was about the productivity and what you actually achieve.
Now, if you look back on your professional career so far, is there something that you would do differently?
Oh, of course, there are lots of things that I would do differently, right? But overall, I'm happy with my experience. I have chosen my jobs based on the impact they have, not necessarily the financial aspect. And I would have made that choice again. I am, of course, fully supportive women who put financials as their first choice. But for me, the impact was very important. And not to say that the financials were not important. And that's another thing that one has to learn. I have read somewhere, and I found that true in my experience, which is that men often will take the job even if they would not think, am I qualified for this job? Whereas a woman would say, I'm not sure I'm qualified. And that a woman generally will expect to be recognized and promoted, including a better salary, whereas a man will ask. And I asked a professor at Harvard, how can I negotiate a better salary if I don't feel comfortable talking about the money and if I expect to be recognized. And he gave me one advice which I can share with you, which is you need to repeat to yourself that you deserve it and that your work merits that. So it's based on that merit that you're then asking the question.
Which governmental framework conditions do you think are needed to support women as entrepreneurs?
Well, I have actually read and read about this and talked to some experts about this because I'm very interested in this question. Turns out that the quality of childcare comes as one of the top. So being able to place your child in a good kindergarten for a sufficient number of hours and not feel guilty about it because it's a quality care would be at the top of the list, together with the regulation that is now available, at least in most of Europe, which is the sufficient stay and the right to return to the same place of work after you take your maternity leave. I find that it's very helpful in Scandinavia that men are obliged to take a leave. And as long as this is not the case in other countries and it's only voluntary, the social barrier will not be overcome of women being seen as the primary parent. So I find that to be a very good regulation that should be endorsed in other countries as well. After a long deliberation, I have changed my opinion about quotas. And today I'm supportive of them. Because in the experience that I've had, many boards would not have looked or engaged women if the quotas were not introduced, or if it was not an official part of their corporate social responsibility strategy or another document that they may have. In terms of education, that's a difficult one, right? I mean, I still think that it should be the same threshold for both men and women. But programs like yours are very good because they give younger women ideas about the roles that they could take and they can do it. So I teach an entrepreneurship class in Belgrade. And one of the things that I do is that I give them a list of entrepreneurial companies that are from Serbia. And on that list, more than half are women-led companies. And they end up being surprised to learn who the founders are or how they started, but it also sends a message, I can do it. When I was in high school, I was very interested in chemistry, and I was literally told by my professor that it's not a good job for a woman. And when you're 15, you don't think twice about it. Right? But now I remember it. And if the situation were different, I would have perhaps considered that profession. It turns out that my life led me to STEM because I was ready to learn later and get the skills that I did not have that are STEM skills. And any woman should just consider STEM as any other field. With one difference though, which is that STEM today is so closely linked to innovation that if you want to make a difference outside of art and humanities, obviously, if you want to make a difference, you need to have those skills. And you can have a greater impact today with STEM skills than with legal and economic skills, which was not the case in the last century. But I feel that in this century, STEM skills are essential if you want to be part of innovation.
Finally, what message would you give to the next generation of women aspiring to become entrepreneurs in sustainable energy?
It is no longer enough today to have just one single study background. So that would be my foremost message. And the second is that it is okay to fail because you learn from failing. And the most successful entrepreneurs are those that did not succeed the first time around. So it is okay to make mistakes if you learn from them and then get up and try again. So that persistence is important. And it's also important to accept that your lifestyle will not be so comfortable at the beginning in terms of the time that you spend at work if you're an entrepreneur, which is why you have to be really passionate about what your goal is as an entrepreneur, because then spending that time will not be difficult because you are enjoying making progress towards that goal.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Anna. It was a pleasure
Welcome.
having you. It was a pleasure having you as part of our energy transition role models. I wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you for inviting me.